let's start with a bit of, I'll call it sanctified imagination. Our candle tonight, it's going to be that gold candle over there, but it's the shepherds, and you remember Luke chapter 2. We're going to spend some time there, but those shepherds out on a hill. It was dark. Sanctified imagination. Kind of. What do you think they would be thinking about doing? What would it have been like to be a shepherd out on a hill, dark, no headlamp? Maybe they had a fire, I don't know. But let's just kind of start there. Let's kind of just, we're gonna go to the scriptures, but I want us just to kind of think about what would have been going on with a shepherd out on a hill. If you grew up, anybody farming background, agricultural background? I know we got some outdoors people, so. Well, just take a moment and think about that, and then I'd like to just kind of hear what would be some. What do you think they were experiencing out there on that hill that night? It could have been any night.
Well, they probably laid back and talking, reclining, eating.
Okay.
That's the start.
Yeah, right.
I'd be like this. Is there foxes or wolves?
Yes. Okay.
I don't think I wouldn't be sleeping. I'd be like,
Yeah, okay.
what was that?
You keep going. I'm gonna just check a moment here.
Depends on whether it was a 3-dog night or not. So,
She said it's okay.
Okay, good. Excuse me.
you know that's where it came from, though. 3-dog night.
3-dog night.
No.
Yeah, it was very cold then, so you kept your dogs close to you, so you could stay warm.
Oh, never thought.
I never knew that.
3-dog night.
Yeah.
Is that
Oh my
right?
goodness, Jim. That's a good bit of trivia. That'll get me on Jeopardy, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Actually, I just made that up.
I was just asked you that.
No,
Is that true?
I didn't. That is what I heard.
Huh.
That's where it came from.
3-dog nights.
It makes sense, staying close to the
Okay.
animals. Because I
Okay.
would think that would be a main concern that night,
So
staying warm.
did they have dogs with them?
That's a good question.
Probably no sheep these
Herding
days.
dogs.
Sheep.
You know, it wouldn't, but it could have been shepherds at a later
Oh,
time.
true.
There've been shepherds around for a long time.
Okay, yeah.
I saw this video and I don't know who, I was reading and you know how you like click on this and click on that, and it was a short video of one shepherd. He was a crippled man, and he was, I would say, homeless. Probably not anybody on the street would want to really walk next to.
Okay.
And he was coming into the town of Bethlehem. And he had water in his, I don't know if that's a skin you call it. And it was like a remake. And I'm sure it's just somebody's version. But they really emphasized how shepherds were often transient. They were not the most admired of society back then. They came and went. They didn't have families. They had issues. Kind of broken people.
Okay.
You might say today. And there was this man with a donkey whose wife was on the back of the donkey, and he had heard them ask somebody for water, and somebody said, told him where the well is, and he could see that this woman was pregnant, so he offered her water. Now, this is just a made up thing.
Yeah.
Then he went on out to where his field was. And even amongst the shepherds, the group that was there, he was kind of an outcast. And so he was the one that was supposed to be on the first watch, and he was the one that was going to take the second watch. And then, the sky lit up and the star came, and it shows him running to where the star is. And at the same time, it shows Mary having the baby, then the
Mhm.
shepherds arrive. And it was just really kind of cool to see. I'm so visual. Stuff like that
Mhm.
really helps me to understand a little bit of what it might have been like.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we don't know everything, but it had to have been crazy, unbelievable,
Wow.
scary, very scary.
And surely, again, no lights, no LEDs, maybe a fire, they gotta keep feeding. And if you remember, I was telling Kathleen about this several times this week. I'll fill in more gaps about the life of a shepherd, but yeah, who was the famous shepherd of the Old Testament? David, right? And you remember some of especially his description of some of his shepherding experience when he went up against Goliath. Do you remember some of that? He said, "Hey, I fought the lion and the bear, and if it would take one of my sheep, I would go after it and try to clear it. But if the lion or bear turned upon me, it says I would grab its hair and I would kill it." Here's the amazing thing. I'll fill in some of the gaps. Usually, the shepherd was the youngest of the group, right? Remember the son of Jesse? We got to crown a king. Bring your sons. And who was the last youngest one?
Yeah.
That's right. So usually the youngest one was the shepherd. And they would pass it down. Each of the older siblings would, and usually they were boys, but there were some girls that were shepherdesses, I guess. But they would pass it down to the next one. It's your job. It's your job. It's your job. Which, filling in some of the blanks, that was also part of that David Goliath experience. Oh, did David get redressed by his brother? You should have been back up there. Well, who's watching the sheep? You just came down here and you wanted to see the army. And David's response was, now what did I do? It's a fascinating dialogue. That was the life of a shepherd. Looked down upon even by your own family. Because the meanliest, lowliest job, lonely, dark, cold. I'm filling some more blanks about the life of a shepherd. What else would they maybe have been thinking, looking at, dreaming about? Just a little bit of sanctified imagination. It is fascinating to me that the scriptures were given in the form of writing, and it wasn't in the digital age and media, right? Because now we see everything. You don't have to imagine everything; it's all shown. But that it's written. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of flesh and bones that are attached to all these scriptures, and that's what we're kind of exploring a little bit. What were the emotions of these shepherds out there? We're just kind of guessing. But what are some other things that might have been going on with those young
My
men?
guess is that they had to be somewhat uneducated, but they had to have some religious education on the prophets of the Old Testament, and that they knew, hey, this is what was expected. That there was a Savior to come and to be born. And so my guess is that they had to have some of that education, that Jewish religious education, to be able to
They sure would have,
comprehend that.
right? They sure would have wanted it. It would have been hard to go to school if they were constantly having to go from this field to this field. And, yeah, but they surely would have wanted it, like all the other kids in rabbinical school. Yeah. Other. Springboard
I
off
was
that.
just because I think it'd be a lonely
Mm.
kind of existence because sheep require. I mean, it wasn't like they took them back to the barn at night. Usually they
Right.
stayed wherever they were, and
Okay.
so they had to keep watch, make sure there are no predators. I mean, it would just be, it'd be a kind of a lonely, boring,
Tedious job.
tedious job.
Fighting sleepiness.
Yeah.
Right.
Although at times I think the skies would be beautiful because when you're out clear away from there and the cities and the stars and they're really pretty. So I'm
Wow.
sure they saw some beautiful sights as they're laying on their backs and then watching.
Looking up. Yeah. They would
Yeah.
maybe known some of the star formations, the different constellations, whether they could name them or not. They could recognize them on a clear night, and they would probably have been scared quite a bit if there was a terrible storm. where do they go for shelter? And, well, let me fill in a couple gaps. This is, first of all, sheep were an important part of the economy back then. I mean, it started with Abraham. You saw, he had a lot of sheep, and then Job, it talked about him having, and even gave account, he had 14,000 sheep. This is Job. I mean, Job was fairly wealthy, 14,000. And then when Solomon dedicated the temple, they sacrificed, ready for this, 120,000 sheep. That's what it says in 1 Kings 8. Sheep and being a shepherd, I mean, it was an important part to the total economy. It was usually the youngest, the youngest male in the family. Sometimes, it could be a girl, but usually it was a guy. And they were on 24/7, 365 days a year. You didn't get a break from that. As far as what they wore, a lot of times it was kind of this cotton tunic. They had kind of a leather belt around them. And then they had a garment, they called it an abba, which was sometimes kind of a camel hair, which would have been water repellent, depending on how big it was. And some of the older pictures or statues, you might see, are actually fairly accurate, that they would have been some kind of a mantle that would have been, his raincoat, but it would also have been his warmth, to have that. And you think of, some of the descriptions of John the Baptist, some of the way that John dressed was probably typical of what maybe some of the shepherds would have worn. And he had a little bag, and remember, this was a big part of the David and Goliath story. He had a little bag, remember, and he put the stones in it. Normally, I think they call it a scrip, but it would have been for maybe some of his food. If when he left home initially, they would have packed maybe some dried meat or some olives, perhaps some bread, but that would have been his little sack. And he had that strapped to himself. And then, of course, Psalm 23, what did they usually carry? Psalm 23, a staff, and what else did they carry? Oftentimes a rod. So the staff was, usually taller, and sometimes did have a crook in it, and it was for directing the sheep. It was also a defensive weapon. But he also had a rod, which was kind of a, it was a bit of a kind of almost like a policeman, the old policeman billy clubs. And maybe if it had a knot on the end, it was even better. And if they could make it so it was even, more embellished, that would surely be able to fight off anything that would attack them. But those were two things that they had, or at least one. He'd have to have something to direct the sheep and protect himself. And there were a couple of things that just kind of stood out. Of course, the story David and Goliath. A sling was a big part of what they would have, and that was just a matter of usually some dried animal intestines. They would dry it and leave it. And that would be a part of the sling. And then, of course, a leather piece in the middle. And boy, it was interesting that they even used that to direct the sheep. They would fling a stone, and sheep are very skittish. And so they, maybe drop a stone on one side of the sheep, and, the sheep would run the other way. So it was both a tool for guidance, but it was also, of course, big guys fall, when David, shot that sling that one time. And so would have perhaps a bear or a lion. It would, scare them off, or it was a key part of their weapon for protection. Some, as you read through the Psalms, it talks about different instruments. There, one article I read said, they might have a flute of some sort. I didn't. It was usually a dual piped flute, but that would have been a real solace, for both the shepherd himself and even perhaps for the sheep. And of course, feeding and watering was a big part of it. It was interesting that, in springtime, food was all over the place, and they would usually graze closer to the village. It's like, good, I can go home and, one of us can go down and get some good food from mom, or dad, or we can at least take breaks, maybe. So springtime was great. Food was aplenty. Harvest, the sheep were allowed to graze, and they were allowed to eat the stubble after the poorest of poor had already come in. Remember the story of Ruth,
Yeah.
where they left the edges? So the sheep would come in after the poor had already taken their harvest. But that was a good, that was also a good time of year because there was plenty of food. The hardest time was after the autumn, winter, and they would either have to go to other areas where they could find food and water, or sometimes if they had a house of some size, the animals would be down below and the family would live up above. And but the sheep would be there, so they would actually be, they could be, but homes that big in Bethlehem is pretty, it's a doubt. The hardest part, of course, is a drought season. They would have to go to wells, and I remember some of the Old Testament stories in Genesis where Jacob was sent out, our servant was, he was to look for a wife, and, he's found somebody who was coming to get water. Well, that was what the shepherd would also do for the sheep. He'd go and find these wells and have to pull it up. But your description is, wow, it was a lonely life. It was a hard life, and it was scary out there. And especially, preteen, 9, 10, 10. I mean, and when we traveled to, Central Asia or the subcontinent, you would see these very young little, children being the main shepherd for that water buffalo or for the goats, and that's a hard life. Let's turn to Luke chapter 2. And Luke chapter 2, these shepherds were out there that night. And Luke chapter 2, and somebody could just begin reading there in verse 9 and until verse 13. 9 through 12. I'm going to turn on this other light just to help. Nancy?
Oh, I can.
Okay.
Was there any indication, when you were talking about all the sheep that were sacrificed, what they used the meat for? I would assume
good
they
question.
just,
Yeah. I don't, when I was reading that, I didn't dig into that. I know sometimes they would have different, depending on the sacrifices, it would be a wave offering where they would just, lift it up before the Lord and then they'd eat it themselves. Other times, after they butchered it, they would just put the fat on the altar and it would be burnt up as a savory smell. But sometimes the entire sacrifice was consumed. So it really depended upon, and I'd have to go back and research that, but boy, what did I say, 120,000? Whoa. That poor butcher. That's a lot of
lamb chops.
a lot of lamb chops. Yeah. So who can help us tonight just read verse, let's start at verse, is it 8? Yeah, 8 through 12. Let me read that out loud for us.
And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over the flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause you great joy for all the people. Today in the town of Bethlehem, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in clothes and lying in a manger."
Wow. Let's kind of go back. Let's put some let's put some skin and bones on, on this story. We're just going to do some observations here. What do you see happening? What do you see happening in this passage? Just give some observations.
God picked lowly people that are not educated, people that are not religious people. He picked people that I think they knew that he could use, and it would be receptive to what they had to say.
Yeah. Boy, Les, when it came to education, they would not have had the opportunity because they were so transient, they were younger. They would have been, and the other thing is they would have been also ceremonially unclean, because what were they doing all day? Walking around sheep, stepping in stuff, right? So, that God revealed himself to these shepherds, these young, these young ones. What else is in there? What else is?
Well, obviously, they were scared to death,
Whoa,
you know, like what's going on here?
scared. I mean, what's it say? They're keeping watch of their flocks by the typical night. You know, Nancy started off, oh, they're probably laying back, and relaxing. Yeah, life is good, you know, nice clear night. Whoa.
Well, I think living out in the fields nearby, like they weren't people that, oh yeah, there's Joe, like they were out there and
Yeah.
people did not know who they were.
Remote, yeah. Like, did you just hear something? No. Who's talking? I mean, it just had to blow them away. It'd be like off something, you know, we're sitting here having our study, and all of a sudden we start hearing shouting outside. We'd say, who's the biggest one in here? And go up and point out who it is. Jerry, you win. Jerry's president of POA, right? Yeah, so homeowners association, go take care of it, Jerry.
Well, and the glory of the Lord, which had to be amazing, because that's what followed around the tabernacle and everything. That had to be really, really bright.
Let's
And
talk
like,
about
you
that.
know, when Moses came down, they're like,
Mhm.
we can't even look at it.
Can't look at it.
We can't
Yes.
see you.
Yeah, the glory of the Lord, I read over that, you know, we've read through this story hundreds of times. What was this glory of the Lord? You said it was in the tabernacle and it was bright, so it was a light. What else do we know about this glory of the Lord? Holy, yeah, it was so holy. Remember, in the Holy of Holies, only the high priest could go in there. And then, you know, they had the bigger area, and he only went in there once a year. And boy, talk about fear and trembling. And that was where the glory of the Lord, you know, God consumed that place, took the sacrifice. I mean, that was a holy, holy moment. So
Well,
bright
didn't
lights.
they tie a rope around the priest so that
Mhm.
in case he would see
Yeah,
and fall dead, like they could pull him out?
nobody else was gonna go in there.
Yeah.
It was in the bottom of his robe, so
Right.
you hear him.
So
Yeah.
keep him
Moving
going.
around there.
Right.
Is he moving?
I hope so, I hope so.
Oh, here you go.
Yeah. Wow, what else do you see in there? What else?
Well, and also saying, don't be afraid, that wasn't like, we're coming to tell you something bad, like, oh gosh, what's gonna happen now? But it was to bring you good news of great joy.
What would, that they heard this message from the angel, what would have been their, you know, if they would have known the older writings, if they would have known some of these older stories, what would have been their knowledge about angels? What would they have known? Perhaps, at least the priest should have known about the angels. But maybe these boys did too. What would they have known about angels out of these old stories of scripture?
Just that they were always from the Lord.
They were from the
They
Lord.
were a big deal.
They were a big deal. Yep. Can you think of any examples? This is Bible trivia. This is Jeopardy here. So some old stories where angels appeared in the Old Testament. Can you think of any?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, okay. That was not a good scene, right? That was the angel appeared and went down to Sodom and Gomorrah. And you remember the rest of the story. Where else did an angel appear? That was an angel. I mean, that was an angel of destruction. Sodom and Gomorrah, an angel of destruction.
It might have been Abraham, but I
And the
don't know.
kind of mom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did, right. And Zechariah, tell us about that.
That was when he said his wife was gonna be pregnant at her old
Oh,
age and then
yes.
lost his,
Right.
didn't believe and lost kind of spot.
Okay, yeah, would they have been, maybe they'd heard about this Zechariah, maybe they did, I mean, he was a priest, right? So maybe they did hear about that occasion. Remember the angels with Hagar? Well, it was angels of comfort, the angels ministered to her. Angels visited Abraham and Lot, the deliverance of Lot, but the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Numerous appearances to Jacob. Remember the angels ascending and descending? So numerous appearances to Jacob. David. When? Do you remember? Is that what you said, Kevin?
I said Daniel.
Daniel, okay, yeah. And how did those angels minister? That was the angel.
Or was that when you were there? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, an angel and.
Well, that was, yeah, but I think it was Gabriel that came to, said he heard his prayer and he came to respond, or he came to answer his prayer.
Okay. I remember the occasion where it says the angels shut the mouths of lions. Yeah. So angels of deliverance, and then you had these angels of destruction. The angel of destruction of many Jews. This was David when he was very arrogant and he took a census and God had never told him to do it. And there was, again, a destruction of many people. So these little shepherd boys had heard perhaps a lot of stories. That's how things were communicated in those days. It was passed on from one parent to a child, and then they heard, as the scriptures say here, they were in there, and then all of a sudden this angel appears, and the first message is what? Do not be afraid. I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all people. Whoa. What would they have known? Well, they understood a little bit about, I think, the heavens declared the glory of God, right? Psalm 19. Yeah, heavens declare the glory of God. So they would have been looking out at the stars. They would have understood the glory of God then. But here, they're getting an angelic pronouncement and a visual of the glory of God. The glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were terrified. They were terrified. What experiences have you had where you've just really been overcome by God and His goodness, His display of glory? Maybe it was something you saw in creation. Maybe it was His word as you encountered it. Where have you really just been overcome by the glory, the goodness of God? Can you think of an occasion when that happened?
Nothing could be as amazing as this, so it's hard to think of something in your life.
I know when our little Allison was first born, I think, oh my gosh, where did this come from? What did you get it over, right?
You didn't have any doubts, did you?
I did not just.
You're
I'm glad she's not there anymore.
But walking out of the hospital that first day and just thinking, we went in as 2 and now we're 3. Oh my gosh. It was quite a spiritual experience for me, just seeing her. Of course, when Daniel came too, the same thing, but the birth of a child, God's glory, goodness. Anybody else, just a thought about that? Did you see any, when you were out, some of your hikes and
I was just gonna comment, the waterfalls and the majesty of that. Just some mountains, beautiful scenery.
folks might not have known where you guys were.
I did a 30-day bucket list, his 30-day bucket list to, well, go ahead and share. You're the one who went from place to place to place,
Yeah,
hiking.
we went to 7 national parks out in Montana, Wyoming and South Dakota, Colorado, Utah, and California.
Wow.
And yeah, it was beautiful. It's hard to describe. Just, you see
Wow.
pictures, but when you're there, it's a little different. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
It's just confirmation that there is a God.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no way that this could come about by accident, so.
And by hiking, we really saw some neat, the walk to hike to the waterfalls at Yellowstone or Yosemite and there.
Yeah.
Grand Tetons and. it's neat.
Yeah, pretty fantastic.
the glory of God, yeah, revealed in creation. Anybody else?
Yeah, another one that just amazed me, and probably a lot of you have experienced this too, again, in creation and nature, is we went to the Niagara Falls at one time, and we're in the boat, and just the power and beauty of the falls coming down. I was just in awe of the creation that it was. It's something I'll never forget.
Yeah, the power there, the power of water. Wow.
Even creation, when I was thinking about this, the fall time, when I was driving downtown and there was one particular street that I was driving toward, and it's like the colors and the leaves, and it was just, I was taken aback. In fact, I had to take him. I said, there is a street I want you to see, the sun shining in, and just simple things like that you can just feel and see his presence and creation.
So it's all what we just described, 2.0 here, right? 2.0, because it's an angel. And is this an angel of my destruction? They're probably recounting, oh gosh, who was the one that stole the bread, right? Is this an angel of destruction, or is this an angel of comfort and care? And the angel said, do not be afraid. Why? I bring you good news of great joy that's for your brother. No, what's it saying? It's for all people. Grasp that. This is for all people, and you're delivering it to us. We gotta feel the magnitude of what's going on in this passage. And not just that they wouldn't be destroyed, but they were to be recipients of really. We don't know how much they knew about. Well, yeah, they would have known Abraham. He was the great father of faith. And by you, this had been said to Abraham, by you, all the nations of the world would be blessed. And now these little shepherds are hearing, hey, this good news, great joy is going to be for all people. I don't have my pen, but if you do, you might want to underline that word all. All means all. And it's powerful. This and what's the content of the message? What's he say? There in verse 11. Today, go ahead. So are you going to get that? Nancy? Go ahead.
There will be a Savior born who is Christ the Lord.
Okay, we got to flesh that out. Those are potent words. First of all, did they know what would have been the city of David? Remember, we talked about that last week. Bethlehem.
Your version said Bethlehem, didn't it?
Yeah. So they would have known, okay, he's talking about Bethlehem. That's where, Uncle Harold lives down there in Bethlehem. They would have known Bethlehem. They knew the area. And so in the town of Bethlehem, a Savior has been born to you, and he's the anointed one. They would have understood specifically what the anointed. This was the great Messiah of the Old Testament that had been heard about, talked about. Isaiah had talked about it, and Jeremiah. They were looking forward to the salvation of the country, deliverance. And this wasn't just an individual deliverance of a town. This was a deliverance for everybody. And they were the recipients of this. So how would they know it's going to be real? Verse 15 through 17. How are they to know this is the real deal?
We're gonna go find out.
There we go. Go and see. Don't just, the angel up there, don't just take my word for it, right? Go and see. No, he didn't really say that, but go and see. And they needed to go and see. What's it say? Here's what you're gonna see. This is the sign. You'll find a baby wrapped in cloths. Some think that the way they would swaddle, or what's the word, swaddle?
Swaddle.
Yeah. It would be strips of cloth. Some say it was a single cloth. Some Bible scholars think it was the same kind of strips of cloth that were used also in burial. They're not real sure, but it was this baby was to be swaddled, but you're not going to find him in the nicest town. I mean, the nicest house in Bethlehem. You're going to find him in a feed trough. What? They were buried just like us, just like us, just like the shepherds, just like where they keep their sheep in the winter. They needed a feed trough. That's where the baby was going to be. I love this. Read this quote. This is called "The Words and Works of Jesus Christ." It says, "The King of Glory condescended to be cradled in the manger that would hold food for the cattle. He who had come to provide heaven's bread descended to a manger." That's good. That's good. So what happens in 17 through 19? You know the story. What did they do?
They went and told everybody in town.
What did they not do? What did they not do?
They didn't just stay there.
Yeah, they didn't stay there. They went and looked. What else did they not do? And it has specifically with what they reported on. What did they not do? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Bill, we didn't study this part. You gave us those verses that we looked up all. I know this, we're digging a little deeper into this.
Well, they don't mention the angel at all.
Isn't that interesting? They didn't mention the angel. They didn't mention the light. They didn't mention the whoa. They didn't mention they were scared, right? Kids don't do that. I'm not scared. What did they do? Text says what they did.
Spread the word.
Yeah. They found Mary and Joseph, and when they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. That's it. They just told what the facts. They just told what had been told them about the child. Whoa.
I wonder how they decided which shepherds got to go.
Yeah,
They can't all do the sheep.
they didn't all go, yeah. Somebody had to stay back.
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Maybe it was the youngest one, the littlest one. I don't know. We don't. It's kind of sanctified
I know,
imagination.
it's just fun to think about.
Yeah, casting lots,
Oh,
right?
you're staying. No, I'm not. I'm going. No, you're staying.
You're staying. I got the bigger club.
Mom said you need to
Yeah. Wow. They spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. I think we captured already what made them so really the most unlikely recipients of this whole experience. They were out there alone. It wasn't the glitz of Jerusalem. They weren't the priests. They were the ceremonially unclean. They were the youngest. they perhaps would have been less educated or no education. But perhaps this made their testimony even more unprejudiced, right? It's like, where did these kids get this? What all they said was what they saw and what they had heard. And then I love the way verse 20 finishes, right? And I love the fact that Luke added this. They turned glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. So, light the candle, and the shepherd's candle, and we'll go through some of these verses from our guide, but like the just light the shepherd candle, and remind me, what are the other two candles? What were they? What was the first one? Go ahead, Nancy.
Why, it wasn't the first one.
Okay.
It was the second.
Oh.
So we had the prophecy candle of hope's coming, right? And then the Bethlehem candle, right? And now the shepherd's candle, right? So we've got the shepherd's candle, and if we could, Kevin, if you could light it. Oh, you did? Well, then we'll let somebody else light who'd like to light? Jim, okay. Great, Jim. Go ahead and light that.
Is there any significance to the gold?
No, I know it's significant, but I don't know why.
You have to push that top part too. There you go. Can you get it?
I'm glad you didn't do it.
I don't know how to use
Here, let me see if I can.
It
Go ahead.
takes forever to learn how to do that.
Go ahead.
It's a trick. It's a trick in. All right, we'll do it.
We bought that and I had to practice like for the teacher.
So this is our third candle, really representing the shepherds and all they did, and what we're going to see in the guide, and I hope that as you perhaps prepared yourself for tonight, is these verses throughout the week really just preparing us to. This isn't, they wanted to give this testimony of hope, expressing great joy. That was their experience, incredible joy that night, and by faith assured this Messiah had come.